Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Republican member of the Judiciary Committee, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. Senator, thank you for being on. Joe has the first question.
Yeah, Senator, curious if how Republicans are feeling about Brett Kavanaugh's vote that's coming up. Does Mitch McConnell and does the caucus believe they have enough votes to move for the final vote tomorrow?
I can only give you my opinion, Joe. I don't know. My hunch is that we have the votes, but that's just a hunch. I think Senator Grassley was correct when he said we won't know for sure until the votes counted, but I feel like Judge Kavanaugh will be confirmed. I think it'll be close, obviously.
You've been worried from time to time over the past year and a half about the judiciary, wanting to make sure that people get put on the judiciary weren't just put there for political reasons, wanted to make sure that they actually had the experience and the temperament to be a federal judge. And you've let the White House know that and the judiciary know that, even when the White House may not have appreciated it. I'm wondering what your thoughts are today after 2 weeks of a circus, just a brutal fight. Stakes couldn't be higher. And what concerns do you have moving forward, regardless of how this vote turns out?
Well, a couple of things. If you look at Judge Kavanaugh's body of work, his 307 opinions, I haven't read all of them, but I've read most of them, and his law review articles, I'm convinced that he's very qualified. Number two, I take away from this that the confirmation process really is a mess. It needs to be cleaned up. It's gotten so bad at times. If our founders had envisioned this, some might have voted to stick with King George. I mean, it's just a mess, and it's got to be addressed. Number three, I felt the anger of mostly women who have been sexually harassed. And it's something that the American people want us to deal with. We should deal with it. I think we have to be very careful. Some of my colleagues believe that you're morally tainted if you don't automatically believe the accuser every time. I don't agree with that. I think you're morally tainted if you don't treat the accuser and the accused with respect and fairness and due process. Now, I've said before, sexual assault is prevalent in this country. I didn't realize it. I've talked to many of my friends about it who happen to be women, and I say, you know, I'm shocked. And they say, well, what planet did you just parachute in from? It exists. It has to be dealt with. This is no country for creepy old men. But at the same time, it's no country at all without due process, and people are entitled to fair treatment on both sides. And I hope we've learned something from this exercise.
What about Judge Kavanaugh's temperament? Obviously, you've read through his opinions. You've read through law review articles. You've seen that as a judge, he certainly has the qualifications. What about the temperament? And we're going to play you a clip in a moment of what Judge Kavanaugh told students back in 2015 about being nonpartisan. But he also talked about staying calm in the eye of the storm. Do you believe that Judge Kavanaugh, after last week, has the judicial temperament to sit on the United States Supreme Court?
Yes. And I 2 points. Number one, I've talked to and listened to his law clerks. I used to clerk for a federal judge. The person who spends the most time with a federal judge is his or her law clerks, and they know him well. And to a person, they testified to me, and I've heard them on interviews say that how even-handed and fair-minded he is. But number two, look at the context. Judge Kavanaugh has been called a rich, lying, drunk, sexual predator. And he took offense to that. And he responded in a very forceful and I think human way. And I don't hold that against him.
Well, you know, you saw him with your own eyes, Senator, at the hearing. And here is his description of how a judge should be back in 2015. Listen to his words.
To be a good judge and a good umpire, it's important to have the proper demeanor. Really important, I think, to walk in the other's shoes, whether it be the other litigants, the litigants in the case, the other judges, to understand them, to keep our emotions in check, to be calm amidst the storm. On the bench, to put it in the vernacular, don't be a jerk. I think that's important. To be a good umpire and a good judge, don't be a jerk.
So from what you saw in the opening statement of the very emotional hearings, did he meet that standard?
In my opinion, yes, if you consider the circumstances, and what he said is absolutely right. I know federal judges, you do too. Some of them
Well, he was partisan. He brought up the Clintons. He was a little, one might say that he was kind of a jerk to Senator Amy Klobuchar. And he was extremely defensive and emotional. Everything that he said in that speech, I don't think I saw the same thing you did. I saw someone who failed at every standard that he laid out there.
Well, I think, again, you have to consider the context. He had been called, once again, some call it a character assassination. I know some people think it's accurate. I don't. They called him a liar. They called him a drunk. They called him rich. They called him a sexual predator. It affected, as it did Dr. Ford's, his family, his parents, his reputation, and the man responded. I do think it's important that judges have the proper demeanor. I know some federal judges. Some are fine. Others can strut sitting down. I mean, they get on the bench and they become all of a sudden imperial, and they're there for life. And you don't want a federal judge like that. I don't think Kavanaugh's ever been like that. I listened to his opening statement. I listened to Dr. Ford's opening statement. I was there every minute, and I can tell you at the end of the day, there were no winners in that room. All I saw were two people in pain, and it could have been avoided because the confirmation process let the American people and them down. There haven't been very many Alexander Hamiltons throughout this whole moment. This whole episode. I haven't seen many Lincoln moments in this whole experience.
Senator Kennedy, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you again this morning. You said yesterday, after having read the report is thorough. I'm convinced Judge Kavanaugh is innocent of the charges made against him. But you also said something to one of our producers up on Capitol Hill that said, I really wish you could see this. I really wish you could read the report. There are things in there that really make me angry. What was it in there that made you angry, Senator?
I can't tell you. I wish I could. I think we're making a big mistake not releasing this report. I think the American people have a right to read it and draw their own conclusions. It's a decision by the White House and the Attorney General, Senator Feinstein, Senator Grassley. With all respect, I think they're wrong. I know normally a background investigation is not released for privacy reasons, but this is not a usual circumstance. There were 5 witnesses interviewed for Judge Kavanaugh, 4 for Ms. Ramirez. The 5th for Ms. Ramirez didn't want to talk. These were witnesses all identified by either Ms. Ramirez or Dr. Ford as people who could corroborate their allegations. None of the witnesses corroborated the allegations. And if you read this report, and I really wish you could see there was some politics involved.
Did the report lead you to believe, Senator, that Judge Kavanaugh had been falsely accused by Dr. Ford?
I'm not going to say that. I think well, let me put it another way. I trust the American people to make their own decisions and conclusions. I've reached mine. I don't think Judge Kavanaugh did it. I'm not saying that Dr. Ford and Ms. Ramirez aren't telling the truth. I don't know them. I'm just telling you.
Aren't you by definition saying they're not telling the truth if you don't believe Kavanaugh did it? You
could make that argument. But when it's a he said, she said, or he said, or she said circumstance, you have to look at the corroborating evidence, if there is any. And there's none here, Willie. There's none here. Every witness, and these were all witnesses identified by the folks making the allegations, did not corroborate. And I know that Dr. Ford's counsel have made a big deal about her not being interviewed, but the FBI asked Dr. Ford's counsel to submit additional evidence, and they refused. They refused to submit anything.
Senator Susan Del Percio here. You said at the top that this whole process is a mess. And should this vote go down on party lines, I think it'll be very difficult for Americans not to look at the Supreme Court as a political body and trust that they're not doing things along party lines. Since this process has been such a mess, would you and maybe some of your colleagues think about going back to 60 votes, which would require consensus and perhaps take away some of this partisanship?
I'm sure that's one of the things we'll talk about.
Would you support it, though?
I don't know yet. I need to get a little distance from this to try to decide how to fix this mess. I just know we've got two choices. We can ride the anger or we can solve the problem. I know clearly we've got a problem. I will say I think the American people, unfortunately, thought the Supreme Court was political even before this freak show that we just went through. People, unfortunately, think of the Supreme Court as a mini Congress, but they're not, and they shouldn't be. And it's something we need to work on. Part of that is the fault of Congress. Congress will not take hard votes, make difficult decisions. I hear it every day. Oh, we can't vote on that. We can't vote on that. I can't take that vote. And so a lot of the difficult issues in American life and socioeconomic policy have been bumped to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's not what our founders intended in my judgment.
Senator Noah Rothman, just to tag on Susan's question, if Joe Manchin declines to vote with the majority and it is a party line vote, does Justice Kavanaugh have a legitimacy problem, and by extension the Supreme Court?
I think in light of this episode, both Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford, their lives will never be the same. I don't think in the long run it will hurt Judge Kavanaugh. I have confidence that he will be a good justice. I do think he has the right demeanor. And I have read all, or at least most of his body of work. But the longer-term implications upon of the U.S. Supreme Court as an institution, that's something we've got to work on. There's no question about it. But it was a problem even before this confirmation fiasco. American people believe the Supreme Court is a mini Congress. It's not. It's not supposed to be. And we've got to work pretty hard to try to fix that. And a lot of the fault lies with Congress.
All right, Senator John Kennedy. Thank you. We appreciate your opinion. Thank you very much. Up next.